have a quorum. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. I'm joined by my two commissioners, Julie Holbert and Kyle Harris. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. It's 4:04 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. I want to thank everyone for your continued willingness to participate in this group. The first meeting in August was geared towards level setting. We reviewed the legislative charge of this group from Act 166, which directed the CCB in consultation with Commerce and Community Development, the Racial Justice Alliance, the Housing and Conservation Board, the Land Access and Opportunity Board, and the Office of Racial Equity to recommend how much cannabis excise tax should flow into the Cannabis Business Development Fund each year to support social equity businesses within the cannabis industry. Just social equity, as we talked about last time, is a term of art created by the legislature that means businesses that are owned by individuals that have either been directly harmed or come from communities that have historically been disproportionately harmed by cannabis prohibition. The board here walked us through some of the historical context of cannabis legalization, including the challenges posed by continued federal illegality, things like lack of access to capital, lack of no lines of credit or traditional banking or insurance, and there's pretty severe tax implications. With the help of the Division of Racial Justice Statistics, we looked at some of the unique dynamics of the Vermont market, including seasonal supply and demand pressures, and the distribution of licenses and relinquishment data by type and priority status. We also heard from Commerce and Community Development about the current status of the Business Development Fund and how those monies have been allocated to date. Today, we're going to do a deeper dive into the effectiveness of this fund and how it might evolve to better serve the needs of social equity businesses at various stages of their life cycle. We have with us Rhodes Consulting, who is going to reflect on the work it has done with this cohort. We have two cannabis trade organizations, the Cannabis Equity Coalition and the Cannabis Retailers Association of Vermont, who will offer their suggestions on how to better support equity in the industry. We also have the Massachusetts Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund Administrator, who's going to discuss how their fund is structured and administered. By way of context, Massachusetts market opened in 2018, so they've got about 4 years head start on us. Hello. They were they're the very first state in the country to identify equity as a foundational principle in their market, and they've invested significantly into making that a reality. Before we turn to the agenda, I want to acknowledge that at our first meeting, the conversations organically arrived at the conclusion that merely supporting social equity within the cannabis industry is not a systemic response to the systemic harms that were perpetrated against marginalized communities, not just by the war on drugs, but other government-led or government-condoned initiatives that targeted communities of color. It's unrealistic to say that the prize for being on the losing end of the war on drugs is access to a fiercely competitive, high-risk market, and that to ignore the larger question about all of the harmed individuals and communities that don't want to or otherwise can't get a cannabis business is not something that we're going to do. We're going to dig into that question. New York, California, and Illinois all have community reinvestment funds using cannabis excise tax money. And we're going to hope to, at our next meeting, hear from at least some of those states about how those funds are structured, what that money is going towards. We also have representatives on this working group from the Land Access and Opportunity Board and the Health Access Advisory Commission, whose work I'm sure would benefit from access to a sustained revenue source. So we're not going to ignore that question, but we also can't ignore the question that we were directly asked, which is We have 87 social equity businesses in the market currently, and they are struggling. And what should we do to help better support them? With that being said, I'm going to turn to the agenda and remind everyone that this is an open meeting. So it is open to the public. It's being recorded. It's going to be up on our YouTube channel. And we also need to pause for public comment. So I'm going to just do that now. We'll just handle this the same way we usually do. If you join via the link and you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. We'll do our best at calling you in the order that you raise your hand, and then we'll move to the people that join via phone. And if you join via phone, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself, but we'll start with Bernardo.
Thank you, chairs, for having me today. I am a tier 2 mixed cultivator and a tier 2 manufacturer, social equity applicant. And so I've been kind of going through it over the last year. I just renewed in August, which I didn't know if it was going to be feasible or not, but we're still plugging along. I want to commend the CCB on the disbursements that they're making available directly to social equity applicants. I think that money is a huge help to me as a small business who has to navigate not just the tax implications and the costs, but the branding and the packaging that I'm required to have in order to stay competitive in this competitive market. And I had an interview with Rhodes Consulting last week to go over my kind of onboarding with them, and I'm excited to hear what they can bring to the table from a marketing standpoint. I will say that as a small business person, I am skeptical of working with a consulting firm that does everything under one umbrella, because I don't want to fall away from having that competitive edge over other people in the market by using a company that doesn't necessarily specialize or share the vision that I want to have for my products. Right now I'm going through a move because my landlord is basically kicking me out of my manufacturing facility. And so the money that I'm receiving from the CCB as a social equity applicant is directly going to funding that move so that I can continue doing business, which I'm extremely grateful for. I will say, as for me, not just as a social equity applicant, but a small business person who's getting into formalized business in this manner for the first time, having been in the legacy market. Navigating packaging, branding, and compliance have really been tough. And I know you guys hear that all the time, and I'm not here to harp on that. From my perspective, though, the money helps, access to land and access to space to operate, which is one of the most difficult things to have. And then making sure that my products can be registered and hit shelves in a timely manner so that I'm not continuously falling behind are kind of the three priorities that I see as far as what needs to be offered now for social equity applicants through this fund. And I have tons of ideas. I'm also policy director with VGA, so Jeff and I chat about this all the time. And I'd love to share some of those ideas moving forward. I don't think this meeting is that point to get into those details. But I will say that anything that the CCB can do beyond community reinvestment, but in supporting social equity applicants with finding designers who are maybe approved or certified by the CCB to support us in providing compliant packaging or compliant labeling, that would go a huge way. Helping find access to insurers and accountants that have expertise in 280E goes a huge way. You know, all of these third party businesses that we need to keep our business going, they all exist in Vermont. And if there was a way that we could support local small businesses that do in those industries to support our small cultivators and our social equity applicants in starting their businesses in a fashion that's timely and lets them maintain so that they can strive for continued success, I think is something that's kind of gets lost in all of the applications and all of the processes that are here. So um, again, I commend you on the disbursements. I think those are great, and it lets me kind of take control of my business with money that I wouldn't have to be able to reinvest into that business to see my vision out. And I think that that's kind of like the angle that I think the CCB should take is how can we directly support businesses and not just through maybe one consulting firm. And I understand that that wasn't really the CCB's choice to just operate with one, but there are many local businesses here that I think would also benefit from helping social equity businesses, and it would be more symbiotic in that sense, keeping it local. That's everything, though. Thank you, guys.
Gotcha. Thanks, Bernardo. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will close the public comment section. And honestly, the point about direct financial benefit is a nice transition to Massachusetts. We have Joseph Gilmore here, who's the administrator for the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund. I know a little bit about it, but I don't want to I don't want to misspeak. So Joseph, maybe if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us your thoughts, and I would start with the basics, what's the funding source for your fund? Where is it housed? And then kind of how is it structured and governed?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much, James, for inviting me. And thank you all to the rest of the Vermont Cannabis Board for your work in setting up this fund. It's good to see that the neighbors are following suit. And what I was really surprised to hear when I spoke to James about your all cannabis program is just the barrier to entry is a lot less, I think, than Massachusetts. It's really expensive here. It can cost upwards of $1 million to open up a retail facility here in Massachusetts. So I think that with the support of funding, your social equity applicants will have the opportunity to flourish. So I've been in this role for about 1.5 years, and we're actually about to gear up and launch our program. Tomorrow is when the applications are going to open for the next round, which I'll get into. But I'll start with where the funds are housed. So currently, the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund lives in the Office of Economic Development, Executive Office of Economic Development, where there are other grant programs. Oop, can you still see me? Yes, I still see you all.
Yeah.
So other grant programs exist for things like small businesses or nonprofit support or even for-profit help. There are other grant programs, and so the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund is just another grant program specific to the cannabis and social equity. And so the way that it's funded is through there was legislation passed in 2021 to create this fund, which states that 15% of the cannabis excise taxes will go into this fund, which to be used for grants and later loans to create capital for social equity and economic empowerment here in Massachusetts. And so last January was the first initial deposit that we got, which was $27 million, which is roughly 15% of the cannabis excise taxes made last year. So we had $27 million, but we had to start the program last year with a little pilot program because we didn't have access to the full amount of funds. So we were able to secure $2.2 million to run a pilot version of this. It was called the Immediate Needs Grant Program. And so that program offered up to $50,000 to provisional and final license holders that were social equity. And that was just for outstanding expenses. So we awarded 50 applicants up to $50,000 just to see what the demand was, how many people were applying. And so 67 people applied, 50 people were awarded. And so that was that program completely finished in April 2024. So right now we're rolling out the larger program, which is, has $25 million. And we're going to be supporting people, not just provisional and final license holders, but also social equity applicants who are in the process of getting their license, so they're pre-license. And so I'll move into the 4 tiers of funding. And so the way that and it's called the Social Equity Grant Program officially. It opens tomorrow. And the first tier is for industry entry support. So that's for pre-licensed businesses seeking to enter the cannabis industry. And so they can obtain up to $25,000 for things like business consultants or legal experts to help them put their application together to actually get them to the first stage of licensing, which is provisional. And so the next stage or the next tier of funding is tier 2, which is immediate needs, which is the same program that we held in our pilot round for provisional and final license holders who have outstanding expenses. Maybe they're behind on rent or on payroll, or if they, a lot of businesses have debt because they take on private loans just because the lack of access to, banks or traditional financing. So that's up to 50,000. Tier 3 is support for license acquisition and business commencement. So that's for provisional and final licensees who haven't commenced operations. They can receive up to 250,000 to do things like launch their operations, including their facility build out and professional services. So whatever funds or expenses are necessary to get them from the provisional or final license stage to commence operations, they can get $250,000 for that. And then tier 4 is business growth and expansion. So these are for businesses that are already operational, and it offers up to $500,000 with a 1-to-1 matching requirement for amounts over $250,000. And so these would support capital improvements, facility expansions, purchase of vehicles for delivery, licensees, and other things that will help the expansion of the business. Let's talk a little bit about the allowable use of funds, and also feel free to stop me if anybody has any questions along the way, if I can clarify anything. I'll also answer them at the end. So the allowed use of funds for the next program are for professional services such as legal, consulting, or financial fees, facility construction or renovation, regulatory and compliance fees, business payroll and debt service, equipment and supplies, vehicle leasing or purchasing for businesses engaged in delivery or transportation. There are also a few unallowable or disallowed uses, such as inventory. So you can't use the funds to buy cannabis. And that's pretty much, that's the main thing, is you can't buy cannabis with these grants. So then I'll move into monitoring of grant use. So each grantee is required to submit financial reports to outline how the funds were used and the impact on their business, which I think is just very helpful for describing why this program is necessary, what is actually doing to create an impact or a positive impact on social equity. And so I was going just to recommend, in terms of data collection suggestions for when you all roll out your program, you could think about collecting the number of businesses that were funded. And obviously, social equity businesses are majority owned. The total amount dispersed to businesses, just total amount dispersed per business and tier. So just knowing where the money went in terms of how you allocated the funds to each tier. The impact of funding on business outcomes. So you could just track the job creation or the successful acquisition of licenses or increased revenue for whoever was receiving a grant, to create that narrative and basically explain how the funding helped their business. The demographic owners of of each business to assess how well the fund is supporting the state's equity goals. And then, and so those were some of the main suggestions that I had for data collection. And then in conclusion, the trust fund is an essential tool for building inclusive, equitable cannabis industry in Massachusetts. Our state was the first state to actually roll out and start with the social equity program, but that only had access to classes and technical assistance, not directly one-on-one for the project. So it was really limited. And uh, this social equity trust fund is definitely a game changer, and just the ability to help sustain social equity in Massachusetts. I think without it, it was really on the decline, because it's what, 8 or 9 years. I don't want to be too far advanced, but we've been open for a good number of years, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And the numbers for social equity are still extremely low. So we can tell that obviously there's a fix needed. And I think that with these funds, we're really going to see a difference in the sustainability and viability of social equity here in Massachusetts. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, thanks so much for that overview. I always get hung up on how much post-grant monitoring needs to actually happen. Like, there's allowed uses and there's disallowed uses. I mean, can you just talk a little bit deeper into that? Like, are you asking for kind of receipts, like invoices, things like that, for that money after the fact?
Yes. So the way that works is typically the business will provide an invoice for how much the service costs, and then they'll need to provide a receipt to verify that they use the funds towards that purchase. And so if they have to complete these financial reports if they are outside of the scope of what we deemed is necessary to provide proof, then they wouldn't be allowed to continue or apply again. So they have to be compliant with each round in order to continue applying for more funding. And again, this is also an annual fund, so it's available every year. It's looking like September's is when the application will open every year.
I just went.
Yes, go ahead.
Did the classes that you initially had go away, or are they still part of the program?
So they're still going, but they're in a different agency. The Cannabis Control Commission is the cannabis licensing regulatory body, and they're the ones that certify social equity cohorts. They do them maybe once a year, and so they're on their fourth cohort, where they'll have an application period of, it's open for a month or two. People can apply and then get approved. Once they're approved, then they'll technically be eligible to apply for our program, which is housed under Office of Economic Development.
Okay, so they ultimately do both, right? They do both the classes and the cohort. Okay.
Mm-hmm. They'll need to get their certification in order to gain access to our program.
Okay.
If a social equity business is a grant recipient, and then while they're receiving funds or when they haven't expended them yet, they sell to a non-social equity business, is there a legal consequence for that money?
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to, and actually that's a sort of broader issue here in Massachusetts, is the ability for a social equity applicant to sell their license, because technically they have to, if whoever they sell it to has to maintain that equity status of 51% majority owner who's classified under social equity. So social equity applicants are generally having a tough time in Massachusetts selling, because they need to find someone who's qualified as social equity in order to sell it to them. If that makes is that making sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's challenging.
Yeah, that limits the value of your business, right? If you can only,
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, for sure.
What we wanted was increased ownership for social equity. We also realized it's extremely expensive to keep up, and it's very capital intensive. But we don't want just someone to qualify for social equity and then go and sell the license, and then it's just like kind of like we're not getting what we were intended out of the social equity program. So it's like a balance.
When I know when we were first talking about how our fund should be used with ACCD, our Commerce and Community Development, we kind of understood the kind of public perception problem with purchasing cannabis and cannabis products using kind of taxpayer money. But, you know, I can see also there might be the same perception, although, like, you know, the thing is that we don't want to get too prescriptive about what you can and can use the money for, because you have business expenses and we're not going to know all of them. But could a social equity business use one of these grants to, for instance, hire an attorney to sue the state or a municipality?
So that they would have to pass through us first in order to get approved for funding. So when there's an application period, it's open for a month. And then once that application closes, then there's a team on our team within our department that will go in and review each application, and base the review is based off of eligibility and also the narrative for the request. So if that request isn't in alignment with what's allowed in our parameters for the grant, then they'll be denied. So it does really need to meet the goals and meet the spirit of what the legislation entailed, which was to help the sustainability of social equity. So I don't think that would necessarily fly, that we would fund a business that's trying to sue the state.
Jeffrey is one of our honorary attendees today. He's on the agenda later today. So Jeffrey, do you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. I guess for the record, Jeffrey Pizzatello from Vermont Growers Association. Joseph, thanks for the overview. Just some follow-up questions briefly, maybe to help us, maybe myself, gain a better understanding about what's happening in Massachusetts. I know in this first working group meeting last month, the stakeholders were talking about what does the social equity applicant look like here in Vermont. So I'm curious, in Massachusetts, I don't know if you have these figures in front of you, but what is like the most common or popular license type? You know, for instance, here in Vermont, it's like our tier 1 grower. So what is it in Massachusetts? And if you can quantify that, what that canopy is. And then also, can you give us an idea of understanding there's likely a significant difference that you alluded to? What are those average startup costs?
Okay. Yeah. So for the first question, since I'm not with this Cannabis Control Commission, which is the licensing regulatory body, I'm not super keen on those numbers. In terms of, I think the question was about the most common type of license for social equity, maybe, right? So in Vermont, I heard it's cultivation, right? Tier 1, which is great, because in Massachusetts, it's super expensive to get a cultivation license. That's like the most expensive one, just because of all the utilities and things that go into it. Even though we allow outdoor grow here, it's not on the low barrier to entry as it is here in Vermont. Like, I heard that you can even start up in your house, like in a residential, which is totally not allowed in Massachusetts. You need like a whole big warehouse for that. Could you repeat your second question?
Thank you for that. Like average startup costs for specifically these licensees as well.
Right. And so I mentioned they were upwards of millions of dollars, just because I'm not sure about Vermont, but in Massachusetts, you have to pay for your rent as your application is processing, which takes about a year. And the landlords will upcharge you once they hear it's a cannabis business. They're paying tens of thousands of dollars. People could be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent. And then there's lawyer fees. So I can't even, I guess you could do it on a smaller scale. And there are other license types besides retail where you don't need to have it in a super prime location, like delivery. You can just have a warehouse in some, part of town that's not super busy, not very expensive, right? And then, so that's like a less capital intensive, I would say. You still have to buy the vehicles and everything. I couldn't put a number on it just because I'm not like in the space of the business. Like, I don't have a business, so I don't know myself, unfortunately. But it's up there, yeah.
Jose, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, maybe I'll add, and maybe to Joseph's benefit too as well. We are from Massachusetts, and we are technical assistance provider for the social equity program for the city of Boston. So we are aware of these responses. I would tell you that definitely number one is retail. I would say number two is going to be a carrier. And I am definitely with Joseph. These programs are north of $1 million to get started and north of almost 2 years in order to be operational by any means. We don't see these businesses starting in less than 18 months ever. And we also know that the majority of the issue always is around money and capital. And back to Joseph's question, and I know there was some comments around the room about the 51% and having limitations in regards of who could actually become owner. It's always a question of common ground that happens because you're limited to evaluation based on who's going to be the buyer. But at the same time, you know, you can't be a social equity applicant and have the benefits unless you are a social equity applicant. Therefore, that keeps the limitations to kind of certain restrictions.
Thanks for that context. Joseph, I really appreciate your willingness to come and talk about this. Good luck with the launch tomorrow. Any last questions for Joseph before we let him go? Mark? You should be able to unmute yourself, I think.
Yep. Thank you for that. And thanks, Joe, for coming. The definition of a social equity applicant or whatever you guys are, the language that you're using, is that somewhere in the documentation? Is that something you can share with us right now in the second part?
I could, you could. I mean, I could share it in there in the group chat after I finish talking, but
That's cool.
it's so the Cannabis Control Commission is the one who certifies social equity applicants.
Okay.
And there are 3 criteria that you need to meet one of the 3 in order to be eligible for the social equity program. And so the first one is having a cannabis arrest or a Class D marijuana charge on your record. So if you have that and you have those court documents, then you can submit that to the CCC during the enrollment for the cohort, and then you can be certified as social equity. So that's one of 3. The second that you can qualify for is if your spouse or a direct family member, if I'm remembering correctly, has a Class D marijuana charge. So then you'll just get those records and then you'll send it to the CCC and they'll approve you. The third way that you could be certified is through you have to live in something called an area of disproportionate impact for 5 out of the past 10 years. So the commission designated these like 30 cities and towns in Massachusetts. They did a study and they found that these were the towns with the most cannabis arrests and poverty rates, and so they designated these 30 towns. So if you live there for 5 out of the past 10 years, there's also an income threshold that you have to make under 400% of the federal poverty level in order to get that criteria. So yeah, those are the 3. You need to meet one of those 3 in order to be qualified.
Thanks. I can hold that other question. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, thanks again, Joseph. And, I'm sure as we continue as this conversation develops, I'll probably have some additional questions, but we can kind of just get in touch with you over email if that's all right. Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really excited for your all programs to take off. I'm definitely right around the corner if you need any suggestions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our list, we have 2, coalitions, trade associations, for lack of a better term. We have the Cannabis Retailers Association of Vermont. The chair, Colleen McQuaid, is here with us. She herself is a social equity licensee here in Bennington, Vermont. She owns a retail store. And just would love to hear your thoughts about how our program is going from your perspective and how it could be improved to be more impactful.
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me here. And generally, the Cannabis Retailers Association supports any movement for a more equitable social equity within our industry and within our state. I am a social equity licensee. I have a cannabis retail and cultivation also. So, and while I appreciate, I think I've done some work with roads in the past, and I think they're wonderful. I think the $5,000 payment that we got was also helpful. However, I just want to talk a little bit personally. I've had some other experiences working in through a grant program, kind of like what was just talked about in Massachusetts. And I wanted to share some of that experience with you because I think it'll be helpful in this conversation. Um, I have another business, Juniper Lane, New Jersey, opening a retail dispensary in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And while that is like a super different state in terms of regulations, opening, I feel like the barrier to entry are much higher there than they are in Vermont by a considerable amount. Um, we recently won a grant there for $150,000 as a seed equity grant through the state of New Jersey to help us get from the point of our conditional licensure to our full annual license and get our doors open. That $150,000 is honestly a little drop in the hat of what it's going to cost there to open because it's a much different process. But really, what I wanted to see is things like that happen here in Vermont, kind of like what they were just talking about, they're doing in Massachusetts. Like, this I mean, this process was a whole big it was like a big ordeal. And I get more specific on it, but and it came out in different things, and there's all these qualifiers to get different tranches of money, and we had some technical components we had to fulfill. Um, but it's been super useful. I mean, we're still in the middle of it. We've gotten like 3 out of our 4 payments, and I don't think we would have been able to open if we hadn't received it. My business partner in New Jersey has a um, extensive cannabis arrest and incarceration history. Um, and I don't think that we could have done it, you know? And what I want to see here in Vermont is to have some sort of assistance program that's ongoing. So whenever, say you're phasing up or trying to like open a bigger manufacturing or to get a higher tier in your cultivation or expand your retail, like there should be some money set aside so whenever you need that, we can apply as social equity applicants and have access to capital funds because it's the hardest part of this. And over the next couple of years, it's going to be tougher industry in Vermont. And I think it's crucial to this industry that Canada, the social equity businesses survive in Vermont. Like this is super important. And I think that we should be investing as much as possible into that because it makes such a difference, you know, like it really does. Like um, I don't know. It's just really hard. This whole thing is really hard, especially when you have any sort of barrier and anything that the state can do to make that better, make it easier, help us to be successful would be to the benefit of the whole state and really to the benefit of the industry. Because without that kind of those legacies and that diversity, like it's not as good. Like we're not as vibrant and we're not as good as powerful as a whole.
Colleen,
So,
can I ask?
yeah.
Yeah, 150,000. What did you have to do to secure that? I mean, was it like a lottery or was it?
It was extremely competitive. There was hundreds. I'm pretty sure there's something like 400 and something social equity businesses in New Jersey, and it was very competitive. I think there was around 40 ones that were given out. And then we had to do an 8-week technical training class through Oaksterdam, which part of my feedback to the state of New Jersey was that was not helpful to us at all. It was not specific to our state, and it wasn't. I actually told them that Rhodes Consulting did a much better job in my feedback because then we at least got the help we needed and we could ask questions to a live human that could help us in our industry that had knowledge of our market, and that was missing from them, but they're working on it. However, the funding came with all these benchmarks, like so you had to have your conditional license, you had to have your location, you had to have your zoning, you had to prove your expenses. So there was 2 ways to kind of do it, either with receipts, so like, hey, that I am going to, you know, they came out, it was like $37,000 chunks. So here's my $37,000 in receipts, and then they send you a check to pay you back for it. Or you say, here's my $37,000 of planned expenses, and we're all categorized, and there's a bunch of limitations, and they never pay for cannabis. But as long as you fit it in and you would categories each one and fill out your spreadsheet, then you would have to, they would send you the money and then you would send in your receipts afterwards to get your next one. So there definitely was some oversight, but it wasn't too overbearing. And it was, if we didn't have that, my accountant would have been really like going crazy. So it's good.
Are there aspects to the Oaksterdam kind of training that were useful? I mean, like, or was it just kind of a total wash for you?
It just didn't feel very specific to the regulations. It was like a lot more about California regulations than about New Jersey regulations, and a lot of it was very basic cannabis knowledge, which I felt like as a business owner in the cannabis space was like it was my consumers know more than what I was being treated like. Like I really felt like I had this information very solidly. They did give us access to some professionals in different fields, and that could be a little bit useful for like some coaching. There was definitely some better points than others. I felt like it wasn't I felt like our retail training here was just as effective than what we learned there.
Great.
Colleen, I don't want to keep harping on the competitive grant process that you had to work through, but if you were to kind of guess, and I don't want to be presumptuous that you may be, but the grant writing application expert, right? So how much time, effort, money spent did it take you and your business partners to even get a competitive grant that you felt was worthy of submittal, and therefore, being able to win that type of money? Because that certainly cuts down what you're actually receiving at the end. If you're spending a lot of time hiring people to help you with grant writing, or people to review your grant application before you send it in, so on and so forth.
Well, I spent $0 because we're very DIY. So I guess whatever I pay myself is all that
Awesome. Okay.
And they did a lot of things, which I think that Vermont would do really well if we rolled out any kind of program like this. There was prep for months going up to it. The NJ EDA, who does their grants, had webinars that were recorded. They had checklists going into it. They made you very prepped. So like, as long as you attended a webinar and went on their website and had their checklist of documents that you needed, you could that was really this. As long as you were prepared, it was very easy. It was just like getting on there, knowing the day that it opened, and then getting that application in, and complete, which is part of they're really about complete applications over there. So, and as long as you could do that, that was really the big. I feel like it wasn't too much. It wasn't a lot of extra cost, just more preparation.
Yeah, thanks. And that lends to my question: did they kind of throw you off the deep end, saying, "Hey, there's this pot of money, see how well you do in trying to secure it," or are they really providing a lot of assistance and helping you get there? And as you say, we like complete applications too, so I get that resonates here. So
yeah, exactly. But they were really good. Like we had questions leading up to it about what would qualify as the right documents or what wouldn't, and I felt like they did an excellent job at like responding, being upfront, and working with us to make sure that we had the right thing, so we were set up for success. And it wasn't just us. I felt like they did it for everybody that was eligible.
Thank you.
So the kind of easiest, the like lowest hanging fruit, I would say, for Vermont is to offer more hours with roads and to give you more direct beneficiary payments. Would that be your kind of number 1 and 2 of a wish list for this fund, or would it be something else?
I think those would be number 1 or 2. And I think to sizably increase the payment would be a huge step, because that's really, $5,000 is nice. That like helped me. I bought a grow light or 2, which I needed really desperately at the time that I got them. However, something like $100,000, $200,000, those numbers allow businesses to operate in a different way. They allow them to make future plans. They allow to invest capital back into those businesses where really needed. And it gets you out of the situation where making decisions. Should I do this or should I do that? Like it allows you to actually make a plan and then execute and build your business in a better way. And I feel like as long as you have some sort of metric around that, so you're not just like arbitrarily like throwing out hundreds of thousands of dollars, you really have the ability to change the forecast for social equity cannabis businesses here.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions for Colleen before we keep moving along? And Wayne, I've seen your hand go up periodically. I'm trying to keep the questions to the people that were named in the statute for this working group. But we're a small group. If Colleen, if you're willing to
Totally.
entertain
Go
a
for it.
question,
I can do a question or two.
Wayne, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was more of a comment to what she was saying is, I received one round of $5,000 funding in the beginning, which was definitely very helpful. I mean, I basically bought soil with that, and that got me through the year with my soil needs. But I think if there is more money that would be possible to come out, it should be based on, like, me as a cultivator, I wouldn't need like $100,000 fund. I would need less, but I mean, more than $5,000 would help me, especially since in 23 I got completely wiped out outdoors, which is that's a different circumstance. But and I'm definitely all for the accountability side of it, and showing what you're using the money for and all that. That's all I really
I appreciate that. And I know, again, not much, but I think ACCD just authorized another round of those $5,000 payments. I mean, again, we understand the relative scale of this.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's more than nothing, and it's definitely very appreciated.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks so much, Colleen. Really appreciate your perspective on this. Next time I'm in Bennington, I'll swing by. Say hello, and we'll just keep moving down the agenda. Jeffrey is here representing the Cannabis Equity Coalition, but I would say that there's other members of that, Jeffrey, and if Mark or Graham want to weigh in, or Bernardo as well, just the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are coalition members, and I would urge all of you, Josh included, to please.
Sorry, yeah.
Jump.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see Josh up there either. Sorry.
No problem. Didn't want to talk over you. Cool. So yeah, I'll sort of just start, and I'll do some introductions. I think I'll introduce myself as well very briefly. I know time is of the essence here. I think that we're just going to present our priorities and maybe sort of where we see hopefully this work landing, and a little bit of our vision for the marketplace as well. So I guess for those who are unfamiliar, my name is Jeffrey. I'm the executive director, one of the co-founders of Vermont Growers Association. We're a 501c4. Pretty proud that even though we've got growers in our name, our members do represent the entire supply chain. We have upwards of just over 90 members now, so we might be one of the largest, if not the largest, member-based cannabis nonprofit in the state. Probably besides the CCB, we interface with licensees on a daily basis, pretty frequently, and that includes a significant number of our social equity applicants as well. We're not here alone. We are largely working with our coalition, the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, which includes the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, NOFA Vermont, Rural Vermont, the Green Mountain Patients Alliance, which is a member-based medical cannabis program organization as well. And that's important. That's important because that's directly tied to what we very much see as the vision for the market. VGA representing basically, in effect, cannabis businesses. We're definitely not the only stakeholders around this table, nor should we be. When we think about cannabis by itself, I'll just pause and say, this is a very special plant, and no state has figured this out yet, as we've identified it, as we've been talking about. So I urge you all to be bold in your vision and your actions, not lean too heavily on what other states are doing, but taking them as examples, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll say that here at our coalition, we share together collectively a vision for what we consider an economically equitable, racially just, environmentally sound, and agriculturally accessible marketplace. That's important because as we speak about really cannabis prohibition really being an extension of systemic racism, that intersectionality is where we arrive at, we believe, the solution is needed, not just for the Vermont market, but for people in general. So, that being said, this working group was charged with, sorry, I was getting a little feedback there. That's me.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. This group is charged with discussions largely around appropriations. I want to share that, our coalition has been asking for these policies and seeking and advocating for them for years, since really before the enabling statute back in 2019, 2020. And intrinsic to that conversation is not just the appropriate management and funding in perpetuity of things like the Cannabis Business Development Fund and community reinvestment, but we also must consider, in going back to rooting this conversation in intersectionality of cannabis by itself, access to land, access to capital, reparative and restorative justice. We dipped our toes in some of these areas, but there's a lot more work to do. And one of the things that we like to do when we ground the conversations here within the coalition is we like to say that very much Vermont is in its, approaching its third year of its, I would say, a market that is making money, but a market that is largely still not viable, and is largely not viable because we have an incomplete foundational work to complete. And that we believe very much is one of the pillars of this conversation for this working group that we hope to have. So I'll stop there. I'll pass it over to my colleague Mark to pick up some of our specific policy points, and I want to encourage Graham, Josh, and Bernie as well to join the conversation if you guys wish. So thank you all, and Mark.
Yeah, and in full transparency, it was Jeffrey and I who had a chance to speak earlier in preparation for this, but we're inviting our colleagues in because they put so much blood, sweat, and tears into some of this work and these recommendations. So, Graham, don't be shy. Just jump in there. Bernie.
Mark, somehow you got muted.
Yeah, some people pray for that. Research actually indicates that a lot of these cannabis rollouts, these market rollouts, I got some background, so if you need to mute yourself on your side, you might want to do that. That what they're doing though is they're addressing social equity with more of a status quo approach of attempting to correct the harm that's caused by those impacted by the disproportionate policing of cannabis, and particularly in Black and Brown communities. And like you said at the top of the conversation, Pepper, we want to get past that. We want to we're trying to move a little bit further. The coalition, we sought to introduce a more substantive and also an appropriate approach that accounts for the impact of systemic racism across the entire market and beyond. I'm just going to roll a couple of things by you. Just what I'm doing is I'm looking at a report that we wrote about 3 years ago, and we also offered this to the CCB, so none of this stuff should be new to the three of you. And shout out Kyle and Julie. With the global racial equity recommendations, we offered you 6 of them, and they were really more pertaining to the operational and just the transformational work that would need to happen within the Cannabis Control Board itself. And I'm not going to talk about any of them, but you can find them on page 5 and 6 of the report that we submitted to you a few years ago. What I will get into is the cannabis. There's a 3-point approach that we had on how we could go about addressing this kind of work. One we called a Cannabis Development Fund, not to be confused with the existing one. This is just the language that we were using at the time. The other one we called it a Community Social Equity Program. And then the third one, we referred to it simply as Social Equity Programs, plural. With the first approach, really in essence, what all it really was is we envisioned racial equity in land and housing, period. So this is land and housing. This was before the rollout of the LAOB. But what we were calling for is a program derived from funding from the Cannabis Development Fund. This would be direct financial support for land and housing ownership. And I'm not going to get in the bushes on that, but that was something I believe still is on the table that we'll continue to talk about. On point number two, what we'd envisioned is that community social equity program. This, in essence, this is to support local design and control of community-based responses to those impacts, reducing concentrated poverty, protecting communities from domestic violence through targeted investments and intervention programs, promote employment infrastructure and capacity building related to the social determinants of health. So again, we're talking about community investment. That's really right over the target right there. And then the last one really, it gets into that social equity programs. And those were kind of divided along the Vermont Community College approach. How do we offset community college for folks, whether it's related to the cannabis industry or not, but being able to fund folks' education. Then, of course, jobs training, reentry, trying to get folks from the inside back outside. And then, of course, the cannabis establishment incubator. And the incubator is really kind of an amalgam of a lot of the things that we've already been discussing around the market and around the industry. I'm going to skip over just to a couple more things that we had on this report. But before I do, I want to go to my colleagues and see if there's anything that they want to add and see if there's any questions from the group. We got about 10 minutes we're working with.
Mark, I'm happy to speak after you a little bit more to like the other sides of equity that I address more frequently.
Fantastic. So then that's good to know. And what I'll do is I'll cut to the chase then. I'm going to skip over public health, but I'm going to stay over the target for about 30 seconds just to say that when you start talking about what we referred to at the time as Health Equity Advisory Committee, we didn't realize it was turning into a commission. This was written the same year that the HEAC was established. We did call out stuff in there about health equity and funding those efforts. And there's a 4-point approach in the report there. Again, these are things we envisioned 3 years ago, and how we would invest this kind of money into our communities. We talked a little bit about sustainability, which I'm not going to get into right now, but the last couple of points I'll cover really is one is compliance and enforcement. And again, I'm talking about equity in compliance and enforcement. Okay, just to be clear, because I'm using a lot of language that you're very familiar with, but what I'm doing is I'm kind of isolating what it is that subject is, and then I'm taking the equity dive into it. And what we'd envisioned is creating a new model that emphasized equity and accounts for systemic racism. This model would obviously not just avoid the use of law enforcement, but become a little bit more progressive in how we police, if you will. I'm going to stop on lab safety and product standards. Pepper, you and I talked about a little bit about this last week. And this, Graham, stand by because I'm getting ready to transition. I know you're multitasking over there, but it's getting ready to come at you pretty quick. But the lab safety thing, the reason why I'm going to stop here is because just I want to make good use of our time, but also I want to emphasize an aspect or a component of the industry itself that has super high barriers, and there are many. And when you go in, you start to take a look at some of the numbers that came out on the slide deck that we went over last week. the smaller the numbers in each category, then the higher the obstacles or the barriers for entry, I think is a pretty good analysis. And I think lab safety and product standards are one. But how about what if we were able to use some of these resources to create a targeted social equity incubator program for emerging Black-owned labs? Emerging Black-owned labs, establish lab equipment purchasing programs for social equity applicants, and ensure specialized lab training for social equity applicants. These are just a couple of ideas that we could use. Again, we're talking about programs. I know we're talking about a lot of things at the same time because we got to talk about the efficient use of the resources that we currently have and whether or not we're currently managing the program effectively, whether it's adequately funded, whether it's sustainable. How do we integrate those programs there? How do we fund other other equity-related programs like LAOB and HEAC? How do we reinvest in the communities? But at the same time, we should be looking at what is the programmatic approaches that we're seeking to implement. And these are some of the ideas that we had. We'll come back to it. I just wanted to share some of them with you in our journey, in our discovery journey. So thanks for the time. And Graham, it's to you.
Thanks, Mark. Graham Unanks Rufinuk, I'm the policy director at Rural Vermont. I use he, him pronouns. We're a member-based agricultural nonprofit here in the state of Vermont. We've been around since 1985. And working with this coalition since its beginning. I have my daughter Juniper here with me. I just wanted to back up for a minute because I'm not sure how much you are aware of. June, you do that. How you are aware of our main recommendations, but I'll break it up into 4 categories, which we've just talked about a lot, and this group focuses on, which is 1, equity funding. And we've always said we want percentages of the tax revenue devoted to at least reinvestment in communities harmed fund and a cannabis business development fund. That was our most recent sort of recommendation related to that, and proper positioning of the community investment development fund administration. 2, direct markets and value added for smaller tiers of cultivators, manufacturers, and nurseries. Then we have the agricultural use, complete expungement of any and all cannabis related charges and not criminalizing public consumption, and the medical parts of our program. And I just wanted to take a minute to speak to some of those different things, because I think that right now the current social equity program reduces state fees. It prioritizes applications. It makes small amounts of grant money available if you can figure out the process for getting it. But then you're in a market which is really challenging, and I would argue fundamentally inequitable, admittedly less so than particular ways than in other jurisdictions like we just heard in Massachusetts, but which you'll likely have a hard time surviving in without a lot of capital as a small producer or manufacturer or nursery licensee. So yeah, we do need to improve our financial administration and assistance, but it'll have limited effectiveness if we can't have a more accessible, affordable, and equitable regulatory regime. So we at Rural Vermont are now working on a guide for small producers considering entering the market. And we've done some estimates of annual tier 1 outdoor cultivator administrative cost considerations based on like a 10 product line. And we loosely arrived at nearly $18,000 and that's just for administrative costs. That's not infrastructure or land or production or marketing or containers or soil or whatever it is. And if you figure in limitations on land access in Vermont, related to land trust, land is inaccessible for cannabis producers, NRCS contracted land is inaccessible, just the general challenges of accessing land and housing. This is one of the cheapest licenses we were looking at, just from an administrative cost burden perspective. So our markets defied the expectations and predictions of the state and its contracted consultants, but I would say our coalition maintained from the beginning that we were going to be primarily small outdoor producers, and we are. We're an agricultural state, a unique agricultural state in terms of local production, local markets, farm to school, et cetera. And I know the number of these producers will diminish right now without an equitable market. Some are still holding licenses just to get rid of product. They've stopped growing. So we need direct sales, not a permitted event, but a natural right of small producers and manufacturers and nurseries. The retail pinch point right now that's being calling this market saturated is just not true. It's literally leaving producers with good product with no shelf space to sell it on. And they're making you take, you could be selling something at 100% value and you're automatically cutting that in half, just having to sell it to someone else. So this is very different from not having consumers to sell to. We can't control particular costs for producers like insurance, banking, tax prep, accounting. Those are all parts of that 18,000 admin costs of that smallest license. But we can control the equity and viability of the market with scale appropriate regs, provide dignity to producers and small businesses, diversify the product base, provide geographic accessibility to consumers, and decentralized wealth and distribution. So we talk about social equity of consumption, which affects the social equity of the market as well. The only way you can assuredly legally consume in Vermont right now is if you own your own home or land. In testimony after testimony, we heard it this year at the State House from testimony that licensed stakeholders said that people use their cars for consumption. Pepper then testified that the cars are sort of a gray area as long as you're not driving. And that's where we're at. This is not only inequitable, but it's sort of a comedy, encouraging behavior that the state's already saying they don't want. And we just need to allow cannabis consumption, at least where smoking tobacco is allowed. It's happening in New York, and explicitly forbid landlords from limiting consumption of cannabis that does not pose any risk to their facilities. In terms of the fund itself, it needs standing ongoing funding, as we've said from the beginning. From the administration side in particular, I see the Intervale Farm Viability Program, and I know Gene is there, and the LAOB has experience in these programs as well. It's a very effective model for meeting the needs of producers. Essentially, you have primary people who work one-on-one with businesses around business development suited to their needs. The program can hook up licensees with independently contracted people to consult on things from production to pest and disease to branding, advertising, etc. The supplemental grant funding could then be allocated within this process based on really strategic needs of businesses and the guidance of these experts. And as Jeffrey and Mark said, beyond the development fund, we see this reinvestment as being really critical. And lastly, of course, expungement. I'm sure other folks can speak better to that than me. That's really why I wanted to put out there is we really need to make this market itself equitable. And it's really hard to make that happen without fundamentally changing the regulatory regime.
Thanks, Graham. I'm wondering if Bernie had any, if Bernie or Josh had anything to add just to close us out, and we can just take it to a wrap.
I'm just going to chime in with my personal experience to set up our outdoor grow. You said $18,000 average administrative costs. I was required to sue my municipality in order to be compliant by the CCB standards. That was a $13,800 bill separate from any other costs. And that was just so I could attain my license. But I agree with everything both the gentlemen have said, so thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Josh?
Yeah, I just want to underscore the message of our coalition members, underscore what Mark was saying, what Graham was saying about the importance of direct to market. Anything else is just straight up not fair, and definitely not equitable. And also just want to underscore, with whatever happens with the equity money, wherever it's going, the board should really be asking who stands to benefit. And it's your responsibility to make sure that the people who benefit are actually, in my eyes, real people and real communities, not just a small group. But, it'd be nice to see something actually happen with this money. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, Josh. And Pepper, I think that the only thing I'd just add to everything that we just talked about is this one other point that you and I covered last week was we were talking about substance abuse, misuse rather, and prevention funding, and just how that looks and how it's working and how it's not working for marginalized communities right now. I know it's far beyond the scope of anything that we're talking about right now, but it is real and it is present and it is impactful. So definitely give some consideration to historic poor outcomes of the approach that is being taken right now. I think, I think I can say it because I'm on the outside. I think the way that we're doing prevention is actually harmful and hypocritical in a way. If we really think about what's going on as how we got to where we are and who's actually benefiting, I think it would be wise if we're going to talk about equity and we're talking about the allocation of these resources. If we can't get it right in our current model with the 30% that's currently going out there through the council and the DSU and across the state, then we should probably give it our own try with this whole business about substance misuse prevention funding. But thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
You willing to take a few questions before we move on?
No, we're not taking. No, of course we'll take questions. Of course we will.
Well, Mark, since you're on the screen, just with respect to community social equity and community reinvestment, I had alluded that we might try and dig into how such a fund could be administered and kind of who would be in charge of allocating it and what sort of monitoring would have to happen to ensure that it's being used appropriately, et cetera. Do you have thoughts about who we could hear from at a next subsequent meeting about how that could be structured? I mean, New York has not started theirs yet, but they do have this program envisioned. California has been doing this for a couple of years, so they've got some experience under their belt. And Illinois has a program that I don't know if it's being held up in a court battle or not. I know at one point it was, but other than those three states, I mean, last time I threw out if access to land is kind of one of the outcomes of all of the kind of systemic approaches that we've had towards disenfranchising communities of color and marginalized communities. Is the LAOB, is that part of the solution here for community reinvestment? I was going to save this kind of for the last discussion point on the agenda so that we can kind of like think through what people we want to hear from next. But since we're on this topic and you're right here, I'm wondering if you could tell me who we should be lining up for that conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Pepper. I think I'm actually gratified that the question came in my direction, mostly because I can see that the board is really really serious about solving this challenge. So I appreciate it. So I believe strongly that we should first be talking to the folks that are closest to us. Right now we've got the ACCD that they're managing the fund right now, and I think we should really take a deep dive with Tim and maybe with Joan, and let's talk about what's right or what's wrong about what we're currently doing and how they would envision us being able to do it better, or even if they would care or desire to do so. And I think that's really important. Absolutely, the Land Access Opportunity Board is sitting at the table for a reason. If they're not willing to take it, if we are not willing to take that on right now, then we should probably at least fall back on the VHCB and see where if there's any alignment there as well. I feel strongly that I think there's a solution amongst us, and I don't think we really need to look too far, quite frankly, outside of what it is that we're doing. I would even consider doing something really bold and constructive and considering perhaps bringing on and I know I'm not going to be very popular for this, but wouldn't be the first time. But maybe the Cannabis Control Board might consider taking this on. It would require additional capacity, but maybe it might be something that might be best suited for the board to take on because of the very unique and just the incredible depth of knowledge that you have about all of the other moving parts. So that's about all I have as far as recommendations for now. I wonder if you wouldn't mind bouncing that off of some of my colleagues or maybe even Gene.
Gene, when I Google your name, I realize that you are a locus point for a lot of various organizations that are useful both in the cannabis business development space, but also for the kind of broader question about community reinvestment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you have thoughts on who we should bring to the table other than maybe just you, and you can kind of share your experience?
My board, I would love to bring with us, but can I ask a clarifying question first? So the 30%, did I understand this right? That 30% of the tax revenue is currently going to substance misuse?
Yeah, the one time that it's happened so far, it was given to the Department of Health, a division of the Department of Health, to distribute in kind of coordination with the Substance Misuse Prevention Advisory Council. Okay,
and what is that number? What's 30%? What's the total? I can't remember.
I don't know. It's 14% of 125 million, whatever.
it's 30% of 14%?
30% of 14%
After our operating expenses.
after our operating expenses.
Got it.
There's
So
a
14
number like
oh,
3 million that was thrown out there at some point.
Okay.
I think somebody said something about 3
Okay,
million
like-
or something.
Okay.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the LEOB would be very happy to come back and have a conversation about this. I think land access really sits at the centerpiece of substance abuse prevention and also equity in this marketplace. And so we would love to think creatively about how do we move some really significant dollars into housing security and land security for both cannabis businesses, but also for the communities that have been impacted. So that's a direction that I'm, speaking a little bit out of turn. This is Jean speaking as a person, not as an LEOB staff person, because my board has not weighed in on this and told me how to speak. But immediately when I think about substance abuse prevention and equity and wealth equity, like it has to come home to housing security and land security. So yes, the LEOB would love to come back and talk about this, and we could actually prepare and come with some recommendations, connect with our colleagues over there that have just presented.
That would be great. And there's another slightly off topic but related cannabis equity component to this, which is the legislature just imposed some new siting restrictions for outdoor cannabis. So, if you look at kind of just the land ownership distribution in the state demographically, and then you kind of say like, oh, and by the way, if you're going to do outdoor cultivation, which is the lowest barrier to entry in this market, you can't do it in your home anymore, pretty much. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but it's essentially like your backyard's no longer a viable grow operation in a lot of places.
And if you're a renter, there's no viability currently.
Yeah, I mean, you could get permission, but yeah, I mean, there's no incentive for a landlord to encourage that. Everyone takes their cannabis tax, landlords, banks, insurance companies, everyone just adds a little bit of extra money to their fees if you're a cannabis business.
I see.
The majority of our social equity licenses are tier 1
Right.
in and outdoor, right? So
Right.
they're
Got
the
it.
most at risk
So
for these new setbacks.
Right.
And they won't be grandfathered.
They won't be grandfathered, no.
Oh,
So if they're growing where they can't grow,
yeah.
they'll have to stop and move potentially.
I mean, I also want to reinforce and reiterate what I heard Graham say, which is that trying to give people a leg up in a fundamentally inequitable market is, especially with $5,000, is, and we talked about this last time, and I don't know if Liz is still here from Farm Viability, but I think she would agree that it's not only not equitable, but it is potentially really dangerous to set people up thinking that they can succeed if the marketplace is as inequitable as it is. And I think it was Graham's point, to have to sell into retail establishments and not have a direct to consumer opportunity. We can look at the food market and see what happens. This is not going to work out for small growers in this setup, especially if they can't grow on the land that they have, if they even manage to crawl through the hoops of getting their own land.
This is a question, Jeffrey, I see your hand up. I've got a question for you and Graham. So I'll just ask the question and maybe we can transition to your question as well. Just of the administrative costs, I assume one of the largest costs at 18,000 for a 10 product line. I assume one of the major costs is testing. Is that true? And what are the other ones? Maybe packaging would be a second one, but
I'll defer to Graham first.
Yeah, this is Graham here. Let me just been running around here. Let me pull up that table again and just look at it real quick. This was just an estimate for this guide for, again, a tier 1 outdoor license. I know we have licensees on the phone who could probably ground truth this with their own stuff. And this was, I think, lowballing a little bit, but testing was only $1,500, product registration $500, bank fees $2,400, accountant and tax prep $8,000, insurance $4,000, background check $500, CCB local fee $100, CCB application fee $750, Vermont business registration $125.
yeah. So there's some stuff that the board can do or at least advocate for directly related to some of the things that we require. some of that stuff is out of our control, but it's certainly stuff that we can kind of just recognize that 18,000, if you're a tier 3 grower, you feel that 18,000 a lot less than if you're a tier 1 grower.
But that would
Jeffrey,
that would be more than 18,000 for a tier 3 grower. That's just for tier 1. So all the licensing figures and the license fee and everything is just.
Yeah, but the bank account, the tax prep, yeah, I mean, the fee is different, the licensing fee, but.
Well, and the security costs are different if you're a larger grow, like that would be.
Some costs
And
that
all
are
the
the same,
testing.
some costs that are not.
Right.
I believe
I only mentioned the
fees are larger.
testing. Yeah. Go
Bank
ahead.
account fees are larger, just for the record here.
Okay.
Okay.
Jeffrey?
Yep, just briefly, I guess I've got a lot of comments, but I want to respond maybe directly to what you had mentioned, Pepper, first, Chair, and then maybe some additional comments from what I just heard. You had raised 3 states have similar programs to what we're sort of talking about here: Illinois, California, and New York State. If you look at California and New York State, what they did was they very much brought these programs in. They created a structure, an infrastructure, if you will, of different programs for social equity and community reinvestment within their state cannabis agency. And I just want to provide some comments there. For those states where they did not do that, one of the biggest complaints, for instance, New Jersey, and I don't know if Colleen can speak to this, when they receive licensees in those states receive any sort of technical or financial assistance, one of the number one complaints that we hear is they got it from an agency that is not aware of cannabis. They're not close to the market. There's a disconnect. What we hear here in Vermont now is from licensees is, though it's a little bit of a mixed bag, they all trust the CCB, and there's a degree of wanting to work with you all as opposed to other groups, other agencies. And the number one complaint that we hear for tier 1 cultivators, which I believe is reinforced by the Tux survey that the CCB paid for themselves, which is you get into the market and you're a grower, you cannot sell your product because of, that is the largest challenge. So I would add to this conversation, outside of the fees and the entrance points to get into the market. Once you build all that up, are we setting people up for disaster? At this point in time, almost 3 years into the market, other licensees are telling us, how the heck are tier 1, be it social equity or non-social equity, able to find a livelihood if they cannot sell the product themselves, because there's an inability to puncture the retailer partnerships that exist now. The point I'm trying to make is, I want to underscore that the development of the market, the formation of the market, is still very much incomplete. And we need to finish rounding out these sort of structural reforms, if you will, to arrive at viability. So not only are we talking about systemic racism and social equity, but this is very much an economics conversation as well. And the more we can bring these people into the fold, the more we can provide more competent technical and financial assistance, the greater, the more viable, the more successful our market will be, period. So I just want to reinforce that. Yeah, I'll leave it there because I know there's other people on the agenda as well. So,
Jeffrey, just for the record, no money was spent on that Tuck report.
what was that?
No money was spent on the Tuck report, just so you know.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
All right. Well, we do have some guests that have joined us. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
I'm just still trying to figure out how to raise my hand and lower it and mute and unmute myself here.
You pretty much live on Zoom these days. I'm surprised.
Well, it's a little bit of a delay, and also if you hover over the camera, even if it's off, it turns itself on. There's a whole nother level here that we're working on. So I wanted to just briefly just go back to this whole idea of what the ACCD is doing right now and what they're not doing and how that's really serving us. I've heard gratitude from folks who are probably not as close to the fire as we are. But as we're dancing around the fire, and I'm understanding that we just carried forward $500,000 and we were just dispersed another $500,000, understanding that there's $1 million in the bank and we've just been trickle feeding this thing, and there's no programmatic approach to addressing this market whatsoever, and it has not been institutionalized at all within the ACCD. It's deeply troubling. And I know we're not here for this particular reason, but just as we are kind of like passing through here, I don't want to paint this flowery picture of something that's going on that's not, because it's not, because we're not really administering these resources in a way that's most effective. So what does that really mean? What I'm suggesting only is that as we're doing this work, as we're preparing to write this report, if there's something that the CCB can do, because it's all about what's in the control and what's in the power of the CCB, the work of the ACCD and the things that they're doing it at your direction. And if it's not clear by you, they wouldn't be doing it. Now, all the way down to the amount of money that's being dispersed and the fact that they are dispersing another round. It's all on you. So, and this is at least how I understand it. And I'm not throwing rocks at you yet. But I guess what I'm getting at, if there's something that we can do to be able to, at least in the interim, enhance the process to kind of, create some kind of program through the ACCD that's going to be a little bit more productive, that's going to be a little bit more impactful. I think we should strongly consider making that happen, because there's nothing really stopping that from happening except for the CCB.
Yeah, all I would say is something that I've heard from ACCD a couple times now, which is, they carried forward $1 million. Well, they actually only carried forward 500,000. They got another $1 million put in the fund by the legislature. They had no idea that money was coming. They had no idea the second amount of money was coming. All they knew when they created the kind of roads consulting contract and the $5,000 beneficiary payments, that was, all right, well, this fund was set up for technical assistance. We don't do that for, cannabis businesses. Let's find someone that does. And then whatever's left over after we get that contract, let's just divide it up equally. There wasn't like an incredibly impactful thinking or thoughtful thinking, but they had no idea whether there was ever going to be any more money in this thing. So I think, what is it, number 3 on your list that you emailed around was, it needs to be sustainable, this fund. And I think that if there was some guarantee that this was a sustainable fund, that we could start doing the work that you're saying, which is like really think about the more impactful approach to that money.
Let me just push back on you just a little bit, because I understand exactly what you're talking about, because we, the last time we were together, we covered that. And I do completely understand that if I was Joan over there and I was getting money and I had no idea if it was ever going to come again, or whether this thing was even going to keep happening, then I wouldn't really invest that much time or resources into institutionalizing these processes. It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. What I was really talking about is basically, how are we acting off of what we can't? How can we act off of what we do know, and how can we refine? And I'm not trying to be critical of the three of you. I kind of like you guys. But what I am saying is that that maybe I'm suggesting that, to me, from my perspective, I think we could do better with what we have. I think we could do better. And I believe that you all agree that we could do better with what we have, even not understanding how this thing is all going to come together. We could probably do better. And I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. Well, that was part of the theme of today. I mean, we have, Massachusetts has actually taken some real time and thought into creating a program. So let's see how they did it. Let's hear from them. Mm-hmm. And then we got Roads Consulting coming up next to just reflect on their work. How would they, if they could redesign, if they could start over, what would they do? You know, like what did they do, and was it impactful from their perspective? Was it not? I mean, so they're actually next on the list. And then I think it's
just
very,
to be clear, Pepper. Just to
Yeah.
be clear, I just want, and I know we're out of time, but just to be clear, and I don't want to be that guy again. But the thing is that I know that what we're working on is something that's incredibly strategic. And all I'm saying is maybe along the way we could do something really simply tactical that we could get done to kind of tighten up that process with the ACCD in the short term. I realize we're going somewhere, and I'm going with you on the strategy. I'm all in with this, but maybe we could do something tactical with the ACCD folks to make the money that we do have more impactful to the folks who need it the most. That's all I'm really saying.
Yeah, and I think that they would very much appreciate our thoughts on that. I mean, I think they're kind of a open book. They're a blank check or what a blank slate on what to do with this money. And so I think we could make that as part of our. I mean, we don't even have to make it as part of recommendation in this report. We can just have them in the next meeting and kind of like map out like what we think would be a more impactful use for that money.
Yeah, thanks for being patient with me on that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the suggestion. Andrea, Jose, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So could you just kind of introduce yourself, what you do, and any reflections you have on the work to date with Vermont, how it could benefit from, how it's going to move forward and how you think it could be more impactful?
Yeah, thank you. Of course. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Jose Perez. I'm the founder of Rhodes Consulting Group, and who we are, we provide technical assistance and support to small businesses. We've been doing so for the last 7 years, and we've been doing so for the last 10 states across the U.S., 3 of them specific in cannabis, 1 Washington State, of course, Vermont, as well as Massachusetts. Within these, we've been able to provide support to small businesses in different categories, from inception in regards to the entire program applications, doing stuff with that, and being able to support them in all shapes or forms. What I will tell you in the last 2 years that we've been dealing with Vermont, the most sought out necessities are marketing and, of course, accounting. So those are 2 things that are super beneficial and being searched for applicants. Of course, the $5,000 grant, it's a big help and definitely brings in people interest to actually take part in the program and be able to actually work with us and do this sort of things. We foresee being able to offer these services to more applicants, but also re-engage applicants who at some point had a particular interest and then eventually ran out of time or did not participate with the program. So we're going to be able to help them out in addition to what we have done in the past. What can I tell you? I think what you guys are doing is asking the right questions. And I know there's folks in the room that would like to see the program get perfected and get better. And that's what we're all here to do. I don't think that anybody's saying the opposite to that. And we're always looking to ways to improve. I've seen it done in multiple ways and in different ways. There's usually a grant component to it on every single program that we have seen. But what I will also tell you that at least being able to put a program together shows a lot of effort. Some of it is through funding, some of it is through resources, some of them is through both. And that's what you guys are doing today. And we're just happy to be part of it, happy to be of help. We do have a lot of advisors dedicated to this project. We have done support in the legal side. We have done support on the human resources side as well, on the business strategy side, even in the finance piece. So we're just happy to keep providing support and are here for any questions.
I think my primary question, I think what we've seen when we go out and meet with cannabis businesses is some people don't know what they don't know. They're really good at growing cannabis, but they don't know that that they should be out networking with retailers or product manufacturers or wholesalers or whomever else. And it doesn't kind of really like come to the forefront until they've harvested a bunch of cannabis and they have it tested, and then it's kind of like, what do I do next? But how do you identify the needs of the businesses when you sit down with them, and how do you kind of help them understand what they might not know, like about just 280E, for instance? Like, I'm sure a lot of folks just don't understand that as a concept.
Yeah, that's a great question. What I would tell you is that we run through a very extensive intake system. It takes us a couple of hours to get through this intake system, which Andrea has met with some of the folks that we met in the room today. We have heard from, and we ask a lot of the different questions, right? What happens at the surface level, some people think that one of the problem is it could be marketing, it could be finances, it could be access to capital, it could be whatever the case may be, right? But we have gotten good at peeling the onion and understanding what is the current wrinkle that we need to kind of fix, and we'll be able to provide support. I did hear comments in the room, right? And I do want to clarify that, right? Technical assistance is not supposed to be your one-on-one provider for ongoing support for the time that you have a business. It's supposed to make sure that we give you something tangible to help you with that particular task and be able to get you on your way, right? So we're not longevity advisors, right? And then maybe that's the difference between a one-to-one consultant and the technical assistance advisory that we do in this program. I think you said it best, right? And I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create good business owners, right? We're not trying to create good cultivators. That's not what this program is, and it shouldn't be this program, especially in my opinion. We're looking to form entrepreneurs. We're looking to form business owners that are able to make decisions better, hire people, be able to grow their business, have an independent business, and at some point exit their business, right? And we don't have to exit the way we all know it, right? But I think at some point we all exit, and we will be able to provide enough resources and support to all these folks to be able to go through the entire stages. What I will also tell you that this market, although is a little bit different, we don't see, I'll be careful how I say this, but we don't see the financial stretchiness of the program where we see it in other states where people get really pushed out from their equity because they just run out of money and they can't really make it through the actual opening, right? It's very operational driven, what we have seen in Vermont, right? It's mainly in regards to saying, this is great, this is wonderful, I have a license, how do I move forward, right? And I think one of the things that does well here is keep it into consideration that you still have a business to run no matter what, right? The segment happens to be cannabis, but you still have a business to run. And that's going to be inclusive of marketing, technology, people, compliance, and that's going to be across any other business that you choose to run.
Thank you. I mean, I really appreciate the work you're doing. Any questions for Jose? Mark?
Hey, Jose. Didn't get a chance to meet you. So what up? You said time. You said something about time. You said some of the folks wanted to do something, but they ran out of time. And I was just wondering what kind of time constraints are placed on this program, and what's that look like? Am I missing something?
So in order to make sure the folks have access, right, across the program, we basically said you have up to 28 hours per program, right? So basically, if you were going to do a contract, if you were going to go and do a marketing plan, if you were going to do anything with human resources, roughly around the time would be 28 hours, right? What the program basically said, we could give people more hours, right? And that's been very beneficial, right? Before, we were limited to those hours in regards of, okay, we need to be able to service more people. Knowing that there was enough need, more people started applying for second services or different things that they needed. Therefore, we offer a lot more assistance than beyond the 28 hours. What I will also tell you that doing these programs, and we do them across 10 different states today, 28 hours is usually the highest I ever seen so far. I never seen a program that will go 28 hours. Usually 20, it's the cap rate. And today, the state of Vermont is actually saying if we need to go back, just revisit, let us know what the scope is, and we're happy to give you more time. But here's what happens, and I'll be respectful to the rest of the operators in the room, right? We're coming out of the grand train, which started with the pandemic. There's a lot of folks that got ARPA funding. They got a lot of grants because of different things, right? So folks were very happy on getting this money, right? But if you tell someone, hey, by the way, we want you to get this money, but we need you to go and get TA support, very few people are willing to actually get the support. They want the money, they don't want to do the actual work. Uh, pre Earlier we heard, right, the need was access to capital. The hurt was also access to resources, right? Well, we want to make sure that we stay within the same form. And I do believe access to capital is huge, right? We need to make sure that we can actually open these businesses. But I would tell you, right, I'm a business owner. I had started businesses, sold businesses, acquired businesses. What I will also tell you that in any particular way, if we don't know what to do with a business, it doesn't matter how much capital you throw at someone, they will fail. That's just plain simple, right? You could keep sustaining the inedible with grants, but at some point, we need to make sure folks are actually taking into conscience that they need to be able to operate and run their own business.
Thanks for that. I appreciate you. And also shout out to Andrea, if that's how you, did I say it right, Andrea? Um, is there some, is there like a scope or definition of the services that you guys are currently providing to us here? I haven't seen that. I'd like to take a look at that if you could shoot that over to us.
Yeah, I'm happy to send it. If you shoot me through the chat your email, so
I'm happy to do that.
we could give you the rundown. What I will tell you, the simple definition of that, right? And although Mr. Antoni might not like this, I understand that. We are one-stop shop services for small business owners, right? We have 26 full-time advisors that provide support to small businesses, from human resources, marketing. Um, it's a nice music, by the way. Human resources, marketing, legal support. We also do finance. We do a lot of stuff with business strategy. So all of the above within one firm. That way folks be able to get that service.
Yeah, please. No, we're unmuted.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for all the work you've been doing in Vermont. I think you said something like you are seeing more barriers for the businesses you're coaching with around learning how to operate than access to capital. Did you say that? Okay, that's the problem. It's not so much not enough money, it's not enough knowing how to operate a business. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And then my next question is, I've been hearing about like bottlenecks in the marketplace. So for people to get, especially for cultivators, to get into retail establishments, are you seeing that with the clients you're coaching with? And how many clients have you successfully coached into having new market contracts? Or do you still see that as a significant limitation, especially for social equity?
Yeah, what I would tell you, so I believe the numbers that we had, right, in 2023, let me just give you the exact framework. In 2023, we did 68 folks that we supported. So far this year, we've done 78, right, in different shapes and forms and different things, right? Someone mentioned earlier about packaging and branding. That's big, right? That holds people back. There's no doubt about that, right? Also in regards of making sure that the product has been tested, big issues behind that, right? But what I would tell you is that we will meet with a lot of business owners, and a lot of it is it's very tunnel vision of what they need, right? But we need to be able to focus that the business needs a lot more than just that, right? And being said, we need to make sure that we provide ample amount of information of what a business does, right? On the cannabis side, marketing is limited, right? But would also tell you that in business, sales fixes usually all your problems, right? But you don't get to sales unless you get to marketing, right? And when you start looking at going to market strategies for business owners in the cannabis sectors, it's limited, right? So we need to make sure that the exposure is a lot more than their mile radius, right? Or the people that they know, right? Capital is going to be big no matter who you talk to, right? But a lot of it is, yeah, if I could throw money into this problem, I'm going to fix it. Well, do we have a plan if you actually get the money? And if we start going through the why, right? Eventually we figure it out that the root of the issue, it's not money, it's strategy, right? So that's why I made the comment from the beginning. I think if we throw 150 grand to people, it's going to be great, right? But you might be in this issue again very soon.
Thank you. I'm asking because I have done consulting with other agricultural businesses on get to market strategies. And for a lot of agricultural businesses, like it's not only will money not fix it, but there aren't really enough strategies to fix it. Like the market channels are too consolidated. There's like no amount of marketing or sales strategy that will ever effectively create a viable business based on how that, until that business is scaled up 100% or some totally different business model. Like that's the only effective market strategy they could have. And that's what I see at a glance. Like I am not an expert in Vermont's cannabis business, but at a glance, I see like some really dangerous territory, especially for small scale cultivators. And so with that in mind, I'm curious, how many clients have you actually coached to get out of the business? Have you seen anyone's business plan and said, you know what, unless you can get a tier 3 license or you can become a different business and you can get $1 million in capital, don't keep putting your retirement money into this business because it's going to fail?
I think you mentioned the key words in this. They're called business plan. Talk to entrepreneurs today that have business plans, and then you'll be able to solve this issue tomorrow. There's not that many. There's not even a napkin with a business plan today, right? Because what happens in most cases, entrepreneurs, they have a really great idea. And since we're entrepreneurs, we're risk takers, we jump at the idea and we says, we're going to get it done, right? I'll give you a perfect example. Cannabis in Massachusetts had a big issue with the carrier license, right, in regards to transportation. They just came out of a 2-man operator show, right? Basically, they're saying before it was if you needed to drive a vehicle and you needed to deliver cannabis, 2 people must be in that car at all times, right? I come from a transportation background. My first business, I grew a transportation company from 0 to 100 vehicles, 300 employees and whatnot. I know transportation just a little bit, right? And here's what I told the guy. There's no way ever this business will ever make any money. It doesn't happen. Just physically, you can't deliver in the metropolitan area in Boston 6 to 7 deliveries per hour to make any money in this, right? The guy chose to fight me over and over and gone through grants and gone through things. You just don't make up math, right? That's what they say. The scientist and the mathematician go into a fight. It's pretty obvious who's going to win. Math is simple. It doesn't, you can't make it up. It just goes through it, right? So when you start looking into these particular items, you look at cases that just are not winnable, right? Are not winnable. And I think it's our job to make sure that we tell folks, maybe we should think this through, right? Maybe we should go through what's going to happen here, right? I think Reverend Hughes was mentioning in regards to folks that would returning citizens and whatnot, very vivid case, right? And they're always looking to get money for their businesses and whatnot. And that's why CDF5s and banks are saying, give me a business plan. If it works on paper, it will work, right? But if it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work. And get rid of the idea, right? So I think for us, we need to be also sensitive right? I don't want to crush people's dreams and say, you know what, I don't think this is going to happen and whatnot. I need to be sensitive with that. But I also cannot be completely removed or naive from the particular strategy of it. And sorry that I keep mentioning back to Massachusetts, but that's the most refined cases that I could tell you. I think the disenchantment of the cannabis industry in Massachusetts has gotten real, right? In mass, because folks understood that it's very expensive to run these businesses. It's not what we think. It's not as glamorous as we think, right? And when we are able to talk to people and say, "I love your business strategy. I love your idea. Is it going to make money?" Right? And if they tell me, "Well, I'm not here for the money," then we need to reevaluate that, because this is really going to create burden to your personal life, to your finances, to the people around you, to the people that are investing in you, right? And even the folks that are here in the room today, right? And we all need to be on board. So I just want to make sure that we all learn that message, right?
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including Jose and Andrea. Any last kind of thoughts, or I see Graham, if you want to maybe have the last word here, or Mark.
Go ahead, Graham.
No, I want to just really from Jose directly about the work that you all are doing. And I think I just wanted to make the point, I'm sorry if it's a little loud background noise, that in reference to the scale of license, to me, this is a regulatory question. People have been growing cannabis and making a livelihood off of it with small, fewer than the tier 1 outdoor in Vermont for generations. It's the system that is taking the money from these producers and not making it viable anymore. Not to say it was viable when it was criminalized, but it was viable when you could directly market it to people. And there's people, you all know people, I'm sure. Most of you who've been living in Vermont know people. There's some of us still doing it. They would not be able to make a livelihood if they came into the system. So I just want to make that point. And that's all I got to say.
Pepper, I just wanted to say that we're not able to I'm not able to comment in chat. So if you could pass along Jose and Andrea our contact information.
Yep, absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yep, I will do that. Yep, I'll
Thank
do
you.
that.
Thanks, Jose. And
All
Andrea.
right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for all the really, thoughtful discussion and prep that went into this meeting. I think I have a basic sense of who we want to hear from next. What I'm going to do is just email that around to the kind of statutory members, see if I got it basically right. And we can kind of pick a date from there. And hopefully just kind of move in a direction. This report again is due January 15th. The sooner we can kind of settle on what the recommendation is going to be, even pre-report publication, the better. I'll kind of follow up with everyone over email and we can schedule the next meeting.
I can't recall, do you have an outline kind of already building for the report, or?
I think what the question directly is percentage of cannabis excise tax to go to the Community Business Development Fund. I mean, I think that we kind of lay out who we've heard from, what the concerns are, how much money it would take to kind of really start addressing those concerns, even if it's, we heard a lot about direct to consumer sales today. That is just a staffing issue at the CCB. There's a political blockade. There's a political problem there, but really if we had the staff here to kind of make sure that it could happen safely, and that everyone's paying their taxes, whatever else, all the kind of other things, so that, just kind of lay out a menu of options for the legislature and see how much they would cost, and then transition to this question of, oh, and by the way, not everyone who is harmed by the war on drugs, which is a fundamental principle of our board, can or wants to own a cannabis business or should own a cannabis business. So then have a transition towards the broader question of community reinvestment. And I don't think we have to have as much detail as to what the exact number is. It could just be 30% of the excise tax. They did that for substance misuse prevention. I don't know why this issue, which is written into law as one of the foundational principles of this market, should be any less than that. I think hearing what the LAOB's mission is. I mean, we're not in the business of doing equity work outside of the cannabis industry. There's organizations, including the LAOB, that have been put together for that express purpose. And I think it would be a mismatch to have us do that work. But so hearing from some of the other organizations that are doing it, maybe it could be, if depending on how direct we want to get on that second question, 30% should go towards ACCD, just like they did with, the Department of Health and the Substance Misuse Advisory Council. Some amount of money goes to ACCD to effectuate the recommendations of the LAOB or something along those lines. I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, but we have to start thinking about kind of what this report should actually say soon.
Helpful,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. I'm going to assume that hand up is a legacy hand, and I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.